if they were just starting their business, I would tell them that I hope they did the market research prior to opening the business. Aside from that, if they didn't do the market research prior to opening the business, then the best thing that they should do, especially if it's a unique business like a niche business like events, would be to find a community where all the other folks are, and then trying to network with peers that are in that industry to make sure that you have some type of support network or you have some type of affiliation network with folks that where you guys will know that you'll help each other, but because you share profits, etc.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Charles Payne. And Charles started his journey in high school and had two businesses, sold the first, and then started the second business. Did the second business throughout college, and it was with rebranded phones, two iPhones before iPhones were a thing. And then went to college in pre-law, studying I think psychology. Goal was originally to be an attorney until he realized the salary versus the amount of time worked. So switched over to doing more in the IT field and started initially down the master's path before going out into the IT business world, built something and sold it, and then traveled the world for a bit. Came back and got a in quotes real job. Worked at a variety of different startups and doing experimenting and learning from others' mistakes before leading to where he's at today with the business that he's pursuing. So with that much as an introduction, welcome to the podcast, Charles.
Hey, thanks for having me, Devin. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So awesome. Well, I just gave a quick walkthrough to a much longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that a bit more and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in high school, pursuing some of the business endeavors.
Yeah, absolutely. So in high school, um, uh, let's just say I wasn't one of the popular kids. I didn't play sports and I didn't do all those fun things. So I sat on a computer most of my time, and I learned how to do finance and how to actually do IT and technology that way. So it was predominantly a result of boredom, but
Hmm.
I was I was actually able to do a lot of things, uniquely when I was a kid. So what started out as a goal or a dream, we actually invented the name or we came up with the name iPhone. I don't know if we did it before Cisco, because Cisco actually owns the name iPhone and they actually trademark it and lease it to Apple. But we did it in 1997 uh, as our high school economics project. So that was an interesting goal. So we did sell some cellular phones and communications. That came full circle later on in my life, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But essentially started another company in high school, ran through it with college. We did computer manufacturing, so I lived overseas for a little bit, and we actually did a lot of electronics and technology manufacturing. I don't know how deep or how much deep dive we want to do into some of these things, but happy just to give high levels, and then we could just drill down from there.
Sure. Yeah. No. Go ahead and yeah, share your journey. So you went or did that during high school and went off and continued doing that during college as well as earning the degree. And I believe as we chatted a bit before, you also went into or started to go down the psychology pre-law path before deciding to change directions. Is that right?
It is. I did graduate, did get my pre-law degree, and I did do psychology. I realized that owning my own business, I could make $100,000 and work about 500 hours a year. And then I asked my teacher, who was a lawyer at that time, about how his normal workflow was. He's like, "Yeah, I work about 4,000 hours a year." I'm like, "Okay, cool. How much do you make?" He's like, "I make $100,000." I'm like, "You work 4,000 hours a year, you make 100 grand." I'm like, "This is so not for me." And then I'm like, "I'm out." And then I divested and went to something different. But that's what really kicked everything off for me when I was younger. As a college student, you don't want to hear you work, double time, literally almost like two jobs, and then you still only make the same amount of money. That's not a pleasant goal. So that's what originally started it for me. And I'll have to say that I love The teachers I had, they were great, and they really helped me form what I was doing or what I'm doing today. So
So
what
now how
happened
did
was,
so as you talked over with your professors that found out that hey maybe that's not the best path or direction or there's other better options, how did you kind of figure out the alternative direction or path that you were going to go?
yeah, that's a great question. So what happened was in college, I already had my own business. So what happened was I was already owning my own business. I was working about 500 hours a year because I was going to college full time. Actually, I was going about 20 credit hours or maybe 22 credit hours a semester. So I was actually doing double time in college. So I couldn't actually work a full-time job because I didn't have time. It didn't work with the schedule. I was in college too much. So what happened was I realized that by me working technically part-time as a business owner, I made the same amount of money as a full-time employee at some other company. I realized that this was probably the better path to go moving forward. And then if you fast forward that as I'm going through college and as I eventually graduated, I sold that business to another investment group because it wound up doing cybersecurity information technology as a service. So basically as a consultant, but we did that as a consultancy. And we actually sold that business. And that actually what gave me the opportunity to retire early and then to transition and travel the world.
So now, so you say, okay, hey, had a great run of the business, got acquired, had the opportunity to take a step back, relax or otherwise pursue any other or pursue other things. Now, if I recall, at that point, you kind of decided to, I'll put in quotes at least, or retire or take some time off, and you went and traveled the world for a period of time. Is that right?
I did. I went and traveled for a couple of years. And then I realized that this is really boring and I need something else to do. Because like everyone always focuses on retirement, like, oh, I'm gonna retire. It's like the greatest thing to do. And then like, but when you get there and you realize that you're bored and you have literally nothing else to do because all your friends are working, it kind of sucks.
Hmm.
It's not what everybody has it cracked up to be. I mean, maybe if like you and your entire group is like, in their older part of life, it might be great. But when you're young and you're looking around yourself and you're asking like, hey, you're asking your friends to go out to dinner, go out to eat, go out to travel, whatever, and everyone's like, I gotta work. You realize that you become very isolated really quickly. So it tends to be cool initially, but then at the same token, you're by yourself and you're isolated. You've got no one around you and everyone else is working. So it's either you're gonna go pay for your friend's lifestyle to be like your own, or you're gonna go back and you're gonna do something different and pivot, which is what I wound up doing. I wound up pivoting and then doing something differently because I'm like, I love my friends, but not to the point where I want to pay for them to do everything. So
Hmm.
then it turns out that I'm not gonna be, like the cash cow or the golden friend or the whatever you want to call it for that. So it turns out that you get really bored really quickly. And then I actually started some other companies. So then that's what led me into this journey.
So now, so you did that, and I think before you started into that, you went and worked for other companies, or went and or worked with startups and doing that. Is that right? Or because I think as you talked, you had the opportunity to kind of learn from what their mistakes might be, or kind of the missteps they were doing prior to engaging in the present company. But maybe walk us through that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So before getting to where I am today, I worked at a few different startups. Um, and I learned what they did correctly and what they did wrong. And then I learned about how they were doing their fundraising activities. So, if I rewind a little bit, I started investing when I was 13 years old. I had a custodial account. My mother went and helped me open one. My grandmother gave me some money to go invest, which was $1,000, by the way. It wasn't like I was rich at that point in time when I was 13. It was $1,000. But at 13 years old, $1,000 seems like a million. You don't know the difference. Um, so I opened up a custodial account and I started investing in stocks and bonds, etc. At 13 years old with through a custodial account. So you take that experience that I've had since I was 13 years old and I've built on it as a day trader, etc. since then. Um, but then you bring that back into, graduating college and then still having all that financial experience and then staying and looking at the startups and the way they're actually doing business and the way they're doing things. I'm like, well, wait a second. This doesn't make any sense because if you look at it from a longevity standpoint, a long-term standpoint, they're not building their technology or they're not doing business to actually sustain the long term. They're doing everything for a short-term function. Like I'm making enough money for this purchase or I'm making enough money from this customer to pay this bill, these salaries, etc. But they're not actually building any value for their customers and their customers aren't going to renew because it's a SaaS-based business, the software as a service. So I'm like, okay, so this is great for a short-term perspective, but for long-term, this is going to be a problem. So I
Hmm.
learned a lot of the mistakes that a lot of the companies that were doing, and I learned a lot of the things that they did well. I mean, unfortunately, they weren't doing a lot of things well, but I still learned what they did do well. And I learned all the stuff that they did wrong, which was predominantly everything else. So that gave me a pretty unique insight. So then when I said, well,
Now,
I've got to get
just
back in.
before you jump into kind of how you land on what, how over kind of what period of time did you take the opportunity to kind of learn from what others are doing well, as well as what they're not doing well, kind of or or fill us in on that period a bit.
Absolutely. So that was a period of roughly 5 years. That was back 2017 all the way through COVID. And then after COVID, I'm like, there's got to be something. I got bored, is what happened. And I'm like, let's just go back and let's try to do something different. So I've worked at Deloitte, I've worked at KPMG, I've worked at the Big Four, I've worked at a variety of other startups. So it came to the point where I was able to take all the information, all the knowledge that I had in financial services, but I also worked at USAA and a few other institutions. So I took all that information and all that knowledge that I gained from those organizations, and then took all the experiences that I had at some of the startups, realized what they did well, what they did wrong. I mean, don't get please don't misunderstand. Even working at a large company like a Deloitte or KPMG, USAA, there's still things that they do fundamentally right, and there's still things that they do that could be improved on. So it's
Hmm.
one of those things where you kind of take the best of every different situation that you're in, and you just tend to put all your experiences together. You keep what's great, and you let go of what wasn't.
So now you do that, you take the opportunity to learn from others' mistakes, kind of see what's done well, what's not doing well, and do that for a period of time. Now, at some point, you are started to engage or move towards the business that you're doing at present. So walk through a little bit as to how you made that transition, identified kind of what you wanted to do, and how you got the current business going.
Yeah, absolutely. So uh, I was an executive at some of the other companies, and as a result, you tend to go to a lot of other events. So like right now, I think on the background of the startup and investor conference that we're hosting, but I went to a lot of AI, cybersecurity, fintech events as an executive, and I realized what those events did correctly and what those events did wrong or incorrectly. So then I took that experience and I was like, well, talking to some of the other vendors that were there, I'm like, there's a better way to do this. And the vendors were like, hey, we need a better way to do this because the same run-of-the-mill scenario is bad for us. We're spending all this money. We're not getting the returns that we expected. I mean, you can go to Gartner and spend $2 million for a booth and get no ROI out of it.
Hmm.
You can go to RSA and spend the same amount of money and still get no ROI. Black Hat, the same. All the big events are more along the lines of a figurehead aspect of it. The ROI aspect, lead generation is nominal. So I'm like, I took all of those experiences, all of that feedback that I had gotten from one, my personal self, because I realized what I was doing and what everybody else was doing. And I realized how I can best utilize and make it so the events actually produced a return on the investment for the vendors, but also for the executives. In fact, Gartner actually, I don't think Gartner quoted me on this, but I've said for years that, executive measures their ROI based on their time that they spend. As you probably know, Devin, you have
Hmm.
very limited time. So you value your time probably most of everything. And then as a vendor is going to value, they measure their ROI in terms of dollars and cents. But what people don't realize is that they're the same metric. And Gartner actually came up with, finally admitted this, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago when they said that executives' most valuable resource is their time. But so what happens is an executive will actually spend money to save their time. And that's how the vendor recognizes their ROI based in dollars and cents. But the executive recognizes it based on spending the money, he saves his time, and that's how he recognizes his ROI. They're the same metric. They're just they're different synonyms. We're just playing semantics, but it's the same.
So now,
But
just
people don't.
maybe just one follow up or to that, which is so. I mean, you get it or say, okay, there are the shortcomings in the event space, or you can do it differently and do it better. And I think almost, or I wouldn't say all, but almost all entrepreneurs go into businesses or to areas thinking they can do it better. Otherwise, you would never get into it. Now, how did but yet I would assume or anticipate it's a reasonably crowded field. I see a lot of different events going on, everything from trade shows to expos to indoor, outdoor events, or get togethers, businesses doing their own events. And so, how did you kind of go about breaking in or otherwise entering into the marketplace that, at first glance might appear to be crowded, or how did you go about the building the business around that?
Yeah, so that was a very unique thing. I actually had people that were willing to come in and actually sponsor and support our business from the beginning, just by having those casual conversations with them. But we do one thing differently than everybody else is where we actually marry the startups and investors to design partners to make sure that the companies have the ability to grow.
Hmm.
So that's what we do differently than everybody else. We make sure that if you're a startup and you're looking for investment, we make sure that there's investors present. But at the same token, we also make sure that there's, the Amazons, the Walmarts of the world, the Fortune 500 executives that are also in the room with you. Because when the investor says, "Hey, do you have any traction? Is this going to work?" I can look back over at the executive and say, "Well, executive at such and such company is interested in using the product, but we need XYZ money to actually raise it." So now the investor, of course, myself also being an angel investor. So now I see that you have industry traction because you've got the executive right there saying that they'd use the product if it was available. Now I've got the startup saying, "Hey, we can build a product if we have the money." And I've got the investor that actually has the money right there. So I really create the triangle with everybody in place at the same time, same place, to make sure that we can get things done seamlessly and efficiently.
Hmm. So now walk us through. So when did you start the events business, or kind of when did you make the leap to doing your own business again, and kind of how over what period of time have things evolved?
So we started the business originally, I believe, in 2022. We actually did our first event towards the end of 2023. So it took us roughly 12 months to ramp everything up, 9 to 12 months. And then here we are in our technical third year where we're actually running events every month at this point.
So you're running the event. So walk us through. Did as you got things going, was things get immediate traction, money's raining down from the skies, or more success to do with? Was it lot or bumpy ride, lots of learnings, teetering on the bank or verge of bankruptcy, or somewhere in between? But kind of walk us through how that evolved over the last 2.5, 3 years as you guys have continued to grow and expand into the events area.
Yeah, those are a lot of questions, Devin. So just trying to summarize initially 2022, 2023 was difficult. You're still running out of COVID and COVID just now ending and people are starting to try to come back, but everyone's budgets are, zero for an in-person event. They're spending it all on Black Hat and Gartner and everything else like that. So for the smaller events, they weren't really spending any money at that point in time
Hmm.
for anything that was new. So at that point in time, it was, yeah, we did a lot of self-funding for the events that we did. There wasn't a lot of big wins at all. Um, but that was okay because we already understood the long-term goal will be beneficial. So I figured, again, the way that events kind of work in my space in cybersecurity, everyone's pessimistic on everything. They won't believe it until they see it. So it's one of those things where you have to, you know, if they say like the field of dreams, like if you build it, they will come. In our world, it's not like that. If you build it, they might come, but they'll look at you first and see if you fail the first time.
Hmm.
So they'll look at you and they'll stare at you from like the sidelines, and they'll look at you a couple times, and then then eventually they'll take the jump and be like, "Oh, okay, they'll take the leap," but they'll wait for somebody else to do it first. So it's a matter of finding out who those key folks are, those key sponsors to bring in, where everyone else wants to follow. And that was really the trick of finding out who would be willing to come in first and who would really be willing to endure and go through it. That was the pivotal point, and that was what was difficult.
Hmm. So now, so definitely, and I realized loaded a lot of questions in there, and you answered a ton of them and did great. Kind of now as you've done that, coming out of COVID, people are figuring out events, and so kind of catch us up where things, you started to already touch on it, but where things at today, and kind of if you're to look out to the next 6, 12 months, where do you see things continuing to head for you guys?
Yeah, so it's still a struggle at this point in time because we're still not widely known to all the marketing departments, which is okay, but it's picking up. So it's a slow progression at this point in time. Eventually there'll be a point where you hit the pivotal point where everything will start to rain, but at this point we're not there. But we are still successful, we're still profitable. We're just not, we're not making tens of thousands of dollars. Most events are break even at this point, and that's
Hmm.
okay because it's building. It's a building and scaling business. So right now we're in New York City for this week, maybe, or sorry, this month. Next month we'll probably be in New York City again, but we'll expand back out to Dallas, and then we'll keep hitting different regions based on as we expand and we grow.
Awesome. Well, sounds like a lot of great things yet, or a lot of great things already have come to pass, and a lot yet to come, and a lot of great opportunities. So definitely fun to watch and see how things continue to evolve for you. So, Well, now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey, and even hear a little bit about where you guys are headed, great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So with that, the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
The worst business decision I ever learned was don't rely on your friends. Um, and what I learned from it was not to rely on your friends. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.
Makes sense, and definitely is one. It's a lot of times, you look to your friends because you have a good relationship, a good understanding with them, and familiarity with them, and sometimes that can be a strain, but oftentimes it can also be one where you don't take a full consideration as to whether or not you should be listening to him, or whether or not you should be relying on him. So I think definitely is a easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from. Second question now that I like to ask is, now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
If they're just getting in, like in terms of just starting their business, then
Sure.
if they were just starting their business, I would tell them that I hope they did the market research prior to opening the business. Aside from that, if they didn't do the market research prior to opening the business, then the best thing that they should do, especially if it's a unique business, like a niche business like events, would be to find a community where all the other folks are, and then trying to network with peers that are in that industry to make sure that you have some type of support network or you have some type of affiliation network with folks that where you guys will know that you'll help each other, but because you share profits, etc.
Awesome. Well, definitely a great piece of advice. Love it, and a great takeaway. So, well, now as we do wrap towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
They can visit one of our websites, or they can find me on LinkedIn, which is LinkedIn/n/NYL Charles Payne.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners are out there, if you'd like to be a guest on the Inventive Journey or a recently launched Inventive Fireside webinar series, feel free to go to inventiveunicorn.com. Apply to be on the show. Or a couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again for Charles for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you.